The day began like any other at the towering glass building of Arden Corporation. The morning sun streamed through spotless windows, reflecting off polished marble floors that seemed to whisper of power, wealth, and perfection. But beneath that shine, hidden behind suits and schedules, lived a man whose presence no one truly noticed, Daniel, the janitor. Dressed in a faded blue uniform, pushing his mop cart through the hallways, Daniel moved quietly, almost invisible to the executives rushing by. Yet, that morning, something extraordinary was about to unfold, something that would tear down walls of pride and reveal a truth no one could ever forget. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity that goes beyond money or status, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world what truly matters. It was around 10 a.m. when Daniel was mopping the east corridor of the CEO's floor, a place he rarely cleaned during business hours. He had been called to wipe a coffee spill outside the boardroom. Inside, he could faintly hear muffled voices, decisions about mergers, profits, and deadlines. It was a world far from his own. But Daniel didn't mind. He took quiet pride in his work, finding peace in simple things, the shine of a freshly cleaned floor, the smell of lemon polish, the order in the chaos of others' rush. Then suddenly, the elevator doors dinged open behind him, and the sound of frantic footsteps echoed down the hallway. A small voice broke through the silence, trembling, desperate, and full of fear. "Help! Please, somebody help!" Daniel turned sharply. A little girl, no older than 6, came running toward him, tears streaming down her pink cheeks. Her blonde hair was a tangled mess, her tiny hands clutching a crumpled piece of paper. She wore a pale pink dress, the kind you'd expect to see on a child from a wealthy family, clean, expensive, but now wrinkled and stained with something dark. She ran straight to Daniel and grabbed his pant leg, gasping for air. "They beat my mom, she's dying, please help her," she sobbed. The mop clattered to the floor as Daniel knelt down, his heart pounding. For a moment, the world froze, the hum of air conditioning, the distant chatter of phones, everything faded away. All he could see were frightened eyes. Within seconds, the hallway filled with chaos. Secretaries came running, a few security guards followed, and soon after, Mr. Jonathan Arden, the CEO himself, appeared from the boardroom, tall, composed, but visibly alarmed. The moment he saw the little girl, his expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Lila," he whispered, rushing forward. She was his daughter. No one could fully grasp what she had just said, but her words cut through the air like glass. "They beat my mom." The CEO's wife, Emily, had been sick for months, mostly staying home. Jonathan assumed she was resting. But now his daughter was saying something unimaginable. Without hesitation, Daniel scooped the little girl into his arms and told the CEO they had no time to waste. His calm but firm voice carried authority, not the kind that comes from a title, but from conviction. Within minutes, Daniel was driving the CEO's car, speeding through the city streets with precision and focus. Jonathan sat in the passenger seat, his hands trembling, while Lila clung to the janitor's shoulder. Every second mattered. When they reached the family's mansion on the outskirts of town, Daniel jumped out before anyone else, rushing toward the front door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the house was in disarray, broken glass, scattered furniture, and a faint sound of pain from the living room. Emily lay on the floor, barely conscious, her face bruised, her breathing shallow. 2 men, hired caretakers, stood frozen in shock when Daniel burst in. Jonathan screamed for an ambulance, but Daniel didn't wait. In that moment, the truth about him began to emerge. Years before he became a janitor, Daniel had served as a combat medic in the army. Life had taken him through loss, trauma, and a painful transition back to civilian life. He never talked about it, never wanted to. But that day, instinct took over. With precise, practiced movements, he checked Emily's pulse, tilted her head, and began administering aid with things he found nearby, a belt for compression, a wet cloth to clear her airway, and pressure on her ribs to stabilize her breathing. Every motion was swift, controlled, and full of purpose. Jonathan could only watch in stunned silence as this man, who cleaned his floors every morning, fought to save his wife's life. When the paramedics finally arrived, they immediately recognized the signs of expert intervention. "Who did first aid?" one of them asked. Daniel simply nodded, stepping back humbly. The medic's eyes widened. Whoever it was, you just saved her life. Hours later, in the hospital waiting room, Jonathan sat with his daughter asleep in his lap. Daniel stood quietly near the door, hands clasped, as if unsure he belonged there. When the doctor finally came out, he smiled faintly. She's stable now. She's going to be okay. The CEO closed his eyes, tears falling silently. He looked up at Daniel and whispered, "How can I ever thank you?" But Daniel only shook his head. "Just take care of your little girl. That's enough." The story spread quickly through the company. By the next morning, everyone who had once ignored the janitor now spoke his name with awe. The CEO, once known for his cold precision and relentless ambition, called for an emergency meeting, but not about profits or deals. This time, he spoke about people. "We walk past hundreds of faces every day," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And we never stop to wonder about their stories. Yesterday, a man who many of us never even greeted saved my family. Not because it was his job, but because it was who he was." He then turned to Daniel, who sat quietly at the back of the room. "From this day forward," the CEO said, "you are no longer a janitor here. You are head of safety and training. And more importantly, you are a friend to every person in this company." The entire room erupted in applause, but Daniel's eyes were fixed on the floor, tears glistening. For him, it wasn't about titles or recognition. It was about being useful, being needed again, something he had long thought he'd lost. That afternoon, little Lila ran into the office again, this time with a wide smile. She carried a small handmade card that said, "Thank you for saving my mommy." She hugged Daniel tightly, and in that moment, the sterile corporate halls that once echoed with only footsteps now felt warm, alive, and full of humanity. The CEO later funded a foundation in Emily's name, one that supported the families of veterans struggling to rebuild their lives. He made Daniel its first honorary director. It wasn't charity, it was gratitude. Weeks later, as Daniel walked down that same shiny corridor, now with people smiling and greeting him by name, he thought of how one moment, one act of kindness and courage, had changed everything. Not just for a family, but for an entire company that had forgotten the meaning of compassion. And somewhere deep inside, he realized that sometimes, life gives us second chances, not to rewrite the past, but to heal it by helping others. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Every click helps spread the light of compassion that still exists in this world. Special request, comment below, what did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of someone kind, or a time you saw courage where you least expected it? Because stories like this aren't just fiction, they're a reflection of what's still beautiful in humanity.